So let's start thinking about why social scientists are nervous about the physical scientists deciding what climate change is, just in terms of greenhouse gas increase, radiative forcing, warming, extremes, etc. So the view of what actually climate change is can depend on who you ask. So causes of change here are listed as changes in atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases and aerosols, land cover, and solar radiation, altering the energy balance of the climate system. That's the natural science aspect of it. But this book by Anthony Giddens says the politics of climate change. So once that physical problem has argued and shown evidence for increased greenhouse gases because of human activities mainly driving the warming, everything else from there is social, socio-economic, political problem. So I will show some things I wrote up in terms of why climate change is a wicked problem. A wicked problem is basically something, a definition that came out of I think a design school in Berkeley from the 1960s. Two faculty were dealing with the sharing of space in the town, and they realized that this was not a problem that could be solved. It could only be resolved, which means it had to be resolved again and again. And they made a nice theory out of it and argued that things like crime, education, healthcare are wicked problems, not in a moral sense, but just in terms of solutions, because the problem itself is not defined the same way by everybody. Solutions are not agreed upon by everybody, and they are not reversible solutions often. Like if you build something, it's not easy to move it or destroy it and rebuild it. And many people have legitimate views of the problem and solutions, right? So climate change, the Stern report called climate change as a market failure problem. So few points I tried to make as to why climate change is a wicked problem is that you cannot know when you have solved a problem under climate change umbrella. So you can think of distribution of the extreme events, floods, droughts, health outcomes, sea level rise. It's not like you set the emission at some level and assume that the problem has been solved, but because carbon dioxide can remain in the system for many centuries and continue to build greenhouse effects and impacts. Glacier melt cannot be reversed in a human lifetime, so it's not something you can solve in that sense. Solutions to the climate change crisis are not true or false, or good or bad, right? So what is good for one sector or one community, one region can be not the same for another region. For example, global warming itself can make Siberia so warm that they can begin to grow wheat over there and become the breadbasket of the world. Climate change is already creating winners and losers. So every solution we deploy will have irreversible consequences, whether it is renewable energy and phasing out coal or whatever is good or bad will be irreversible. Ordinary problems come with a limited set of potential solutions. Climate change doesn't. For example, Montreal Protocol was agreed upon beautifully, and the problem of CFCs creating ozone hole was bad for everybody. And there was a solution. HFCs were going to replace CFCs, which was already ready. But now we know that HFCs have serious global warming problems, so they have to be phased out. So every solution cannot be global, and it's not something like a silver bullet, even planting 1 trillion trees, for example. Climate change involves many stakeholders, nearly all of whom have different ideas of the problems and its ideal solutions. Okay, so that's a wicked problem. Some of the statements from Demerit's paper: the response to public doubts and scientific uncertainty is not merely to provide more and more technical knowledge about the Earth system. there is also a pressing need to recognize, reflect upon, and work with the social context of this science to build the social trust and solidarity that are needed for any effective response to climate change. Okay, so this is a socio-economic political problem that requires not just more details about how cyclones are rapidly intensifying and so on. The authors of this chapter say Earth system science is not a rigid framework of the immutable laws of physics. Its methods and approaches are supposed to allow the investigation and understanding of complex causalities, right, because of the feedbacks, contingent behaviors, how people respond to the changes, adaptive responses, so how people adjust, like farmers adjusting to changes in rainfall patterns, and a wide range of other interdependencies, including those between human and natural domains. Okay, so these are the sorts of things we have to worry about. Maybe I'll add another point here from geography. This is also from demerit from a later paper in the Annals of Association of American Geographers, which talks about the construction of global warming and politics of science. Right? Many people have argued that even though we think natural science is not contextual, it's objective and based on equations, fundamental principles, theories, observations, validation, preciseness, accuracy, and so on. There is a framework in which science gets done. So Demerit argues that there is a tendency to concentrate upon the uses of scientific knowledge downstream. So it's produced here and dished out to be used by decision makers and so on in the political process, and discount the ways in which a politics involving particular cultural understandings, social commitments, and power relations gets built upstream through the technical practices of science itself. There are many examples of this, on how, let's say in a country like India, the way physics is done got defined by a few people many decades ago in the last century. And their influence continues through because the upstream social commitments, cultural practices, value of education, power relations, etc., set the tone. Universality and authority of climate science versus context-dependent and context-specific social science is needed, according to Mike Hulme, who writes a lot on why climate science is controversial, why we shouldn't be saying things like there is a deadline to save the earth and so on and so forth. So social science tends to bring a very different perspective than natural scientists or physical climate scientists like me are used to. We do feedbacks between biosphere and the climate, atmosphere, hydrosphere, and we think we understood it, but actually the human feedbacks are more critical on many occasions.